Well, hello, fellow travelers. I am Dr. Richard Hector. Welcome to Soucouyant, a Caribbean supernatural tale, where we reimagine the Soucouyant, a character from the folklore of the Caribbean. Here, we follow her as she is depicted in Trinidad. Her depiction might be different in other places in the Caribbean. If you know about Soucouyant, I hope you like this reinterpretation. If you are new to Soucouyant, I hope you enjoy meeting this new character and that she motivates you to look into other folk characters, not only from the Caribbean, but also from other places. I don't have any children, Mr. Lee. Then why don't you just move in with your man, your boyfriend? He asked. I don't have one, Mr. Lee, she said. A nice young lady like you don't have a boyfriend? You never had a boyfriend? I I had a boyfriend, Mr. Lee, but I don't have one now, she said. So you're a virgin? No, I'm not, she trailed off. He let the single page fall on the desk and leaned back in his chair looking at her. Her brown skin contrasted with the white fabric, and the small red flowers appeared to tumble from her breasts that pushed against the thin fabric. Her brassiere did not restrain as much as it promoted. She had a narrow waist and wide hips that the dress accentuated. Her fine ankles flowed into black shoes. Like her ankles, her wrists were fine, and she had long, slender fingers. She did not wear a necklace around her graceful neck. Her full lips rose from a pointed chin into high cheekbones. Her almond-shaped eyes captured him before her eyelids covered them like lowering blinds as she looked down bashfully. He tried to swallow, but his mouth was dry. He took a sip of water from a glass on his desk. Then he cleared his throat and spoke. I saw you talk to the girls when you were here with your aunt. Did they tell you the starting pay? I will take anything, Mr. Lee. She looked up at him, then quickly looked down again. That's good. That's a good attitude to increase your pay with me. You can start tomorrow? Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. Lee. I'll start you in the back making preparations. When I see how you handle things, you'll move to the front. You okay with that? Yes, Mr. Lee, she said. I only have time for you in the afternoon and evening for training, so you'll have to work late. But you'll start late. You understand? Yes, Mr. Lee. Okay. Come in tomorrow for 1 o'clock. Yes, Mr. Lee. Thank you, Mr. Lee. He got up and walked her to the front of the store. All of the workers were gone. Only the security guard who locked up at night was there. He was sitting in a chair near the door listening to a recap of a cricket match on a small, battery-operated transistor radio. He got up and held the door open for them. It was fully dark night outside, but the sidewalk was well lit from the store windows. The young lady nodded to the guard and thanked Mr. Lee again, then turned and walked away. A faint but pleasant fragrance seemed to invite his caress. He put his hands in his pockets to suppress the urge to touch her. He paused for a moment looking at her walk away. The light from his store windows passed through the thin fabric as if it were gauze. He savored the silhouette of her body. The anticipation of taking her svelte body made butterflies flutter low in his stomach. He went back upstairs to his office and looked at the ledger on his desk. However, he was too stimulated to work anymore. The pit of his stomach still tingled from his desire, and the grumbling in his stomach reminded him that he only had a sip of water since a hurried lunch at midday. He closed the ledger and locked it away in a metal chest. Next, he locked the deposit bag, its contents already counted and recorded. Placing the night deposit and his laptop in a large briefcase, he walked downstairs and flipped the switch to turn off the lights in the back of the store. He stood with the security guard as the latter locked the glass doors, then pulled the folding accordion security gate together and locked it. They walked to his car. With his family away on vacation, he didn't need a chauffeur. So he transferred his chauffeur to driving the big truck or vans to pick up merchandise from the port and the warehouse, as well as making deliveries. Mr. Lee could avoid the rush hour traffic to and from work by leaving home after the morning rush or before the evening rush. He tended to leave before in the morning and after work rush hour traffic. Mr. Lee pressed the button on his key twice to disarm the alarm and unlock the doors. Lifting the trunk lid, he placed the briefcase inside and slammed it shut. Then he tugged on it to make sure it was locked. The guards stood outside looking around for anyone approaching them while Mr. Lee got in and started the engine. Then the guard got in, and they drove quickly to a bank on Independence Square. Mr. Lee went into the alcove and made the deposit while the guard waited on the sidewalk. Mr. Lee chose his bank because it was a busy corner and well lit. A police mobile unit sat a few yards away. If he felt threatened, he could raise a hubbub and rouse the policemen to action. He drove to the food vendors on Independence Square. The guard pointed to a vendor truck. Mr. Lee stopped the car and gave the guard 3 $20 bills to buy a meal of stewed chicken, fried plantain, rice, and callaloo, and a peanut punch with banana, condensed milk, and UHT milk, ultra-high temperature pasteurized milk. He dropped the guard off back at the store. The guard alighted and thanked Mr. Lee for dinner. As Mr. Lee drove away, he saw the guard pull up a box and sit on it. The guard took the styrofoam bowl out of the brown bag. The smell of the food lingered in the car. Mr. Lee's stomach grumbled to be filled. He drove to the Chinese Association on Lower Charlotte Street, where he ordered dinner and sat at the table by the window with a view of the hills. Opening his laptop, he typed in his password. His email program showed he had mail. He clicked it open. It was a note from his wife, who was visiting relatives in Toronto. She decided to stay another month. He clenched his teeth and swore in his mind, "Muzu," and recounted how much she was deliberately wasteful just to annoy him. He fumed mentally. She bought first-class round-trip tickets for their son, daughter, and herself. He argued that seats in coach arrived at the same time as seats in first class. She said that the kids deserved to arrive rested because the flight was so long and they deserved it for how hard they worked in school this year. He told her that they were supposed to work hard. No one should get extra benefits for doing what they were supposed to do. She could not be gainsaid, as he knew she would not be. She told him they would stay 3 weeks. Now she's extending it for another month. He looked through the windows at the Laventille Hills. His face was stoic, but he seethed inside. Then, as he watched the hills, he remembered the young body that would soon be writhing under him as he took her. He began to feel glad that he had the extra weeks to focus on the game and the inevitable conquests. He felt he earned what he anticipated for all the problems and aggravation he had to endure. He was the first Chinese to break into the fabric trade in a big way. He ventured out of restaurants, groceries, and dry goods. Now the merchants in the Chinese Association tried to ingratiate themselves with him, but in the beginning they snickered and bad-talked him behind his back. When they went to fete after fete after fete, like Calypsonians, he was working hard, establishing links with fabric manufacturers in China. He had to deal with vanishingly small profit margins to sell expensive fabric cheaper than the Syrians, pay bribes to get his containers off the ports and unloaded, pay high wages to hire good girls to push fabric, and not make errors cutting. Every hand that patted him on his back held a knife, as they were backstabbing him and trying to steal the market for Chinese fabric that he established. Well, he was ruthless and jealously protective as he continued to expand his business holdings. He continually defeated and subdued the Syrian business class he called Syrian Fabric League, and he felt his accomplishment was tantamount to establishing a prefecture like in ancient China. If he lived in ancient China, he would have been a revered leader. He wouldn't have to sneak these girls to gratify himself. If he lived in ancient China, he'd have as many girls as he wanted and openly. In ancient China, or so he imagined, The woman would compete to bear his children and heirs to his fortune. He brooded over a bowl of wonton soup that was placed in front of him. In this country, the few workers that he got pregnant should be honored to bear his children. A conqueror doesn't worry about mundane things like feelings and petty problems of children. He felt no guilt when he had to fire them to maintain his marriage and his reputation. Their plight did not change much from one menial job to the next, or to no job at all. They managed to peck out a meager existence. They were like pigeons that infested the city and covered rooftops and sidewalks with droppings and added their odor to the air. Several times a week he had to have the sidewalk washed. He made a mental note to have his wife buy owl statues to install on the roof. Gemma started working the hours Mr. Lee requested. She always wore clean dresses. He invariably recognized the fabric by the patterns. It was always fabric he sold. In fact, the cheapest fabric he sold. He never expected that fabric to be used for clothing, but for window curtains. The fabric was light and translucent. He enjoyed the sight of her body when she worked near the front of the store and he was in the back. The brightness of the street flowed through her dress. Her silhouette enthralled him. In supposedly teaching her about fabrics, Mr. Lee would appear to brush against her innocently. Sometimes he pressed against her to reach up for a bolt of cloth above her head. As he fumbled with the cloth, he lingered against her. The softness of her body aroused him, and her subtle musk made his head swim. The ingenue didn't notice, but the other women did. They clenched their teeth and kept their peace. However, customers noticed the considerable lagniappe on their purchases. 3 yards of cloth became 3 yards and 12 inches. However, their quiet rebellion had a positive effect on the amount of money the store earned, as word got around. The women tried to protect Gemma without endangering their jobs. They were all as poor as Gemma and needed the money, even as small as it was. All the young women who worked in the store had endured Mr. Lee's advances when they first started working in the store. Some succumbed and had sex with him, generally the path to a salary raise. One of the workers who befriended Gemma was a matronly woman called Miss Margarita. Her name was Margarita Mendez. She was of Portuguese ancestry. Her family lived in a small rural village on the edge of the Aripo forest. She grew up with the stories of the forest dwellers. She had quickly befriended the shy girl and became her mentor.